In a small community about 70 miles east of Cincinnati sits the village of Piketon, home to around 2,000 people. Rural with a rugged terrain filled with farms and long walks between each property, an everyone knows everyone kind of place filled with a strong community spirit. But in April 2016, Piketon would become the scene of Ohio's largest ever mass murder and one of the most complex investigations in its history. We begin this case at 7:49 a.m. Friday, April 22nd, 2016. A 911 call came in from Bobby Joe Manley.
911. Yes, I need to get the 40. I need you to tell me the address. What's the address? I think my brother-in-law's dead. Okay, what's the address? Give me just a second. Ma'am, you gotta tell me what's going on. There's blood all over the house. Okay. My brother-in-law's in the bedroom and looks like someone has beat the hell out of him.
Bobby stopped by her brother-in-law's trailer each morning to help feed the dogs and chickens. Bobby's brother-in-law was Christopher Rhoden Sr. He had recently separated from Bobby's sister Dana, but this hadn't changed any of Bobby's routine. She still kept in touch and was happy to help out at the trailer. But this day would be far from the norm. As she shut her car door, she spotted his dogs outside, whereas normally they would be in the trailer. As she grabbed the door handle, she found it locked. Christopher would always open it first thing for her to just walk in. Perplexed, she grabbed her spare key and tentatively stepped inside. It was totally silent. She looked down and saw a trail of blood. A drag mark. She followed it and found the bodies of her brother-in-law Christopher Rhoden Sr. and his cousin Gary Rhoden in the bedrooms.
Did you drive over there?
Yes, I did.
Okay, what's your name?
Mine?
What's your brother-in-law's name?
Chris Rhoden and Gary Rhoden.
Chris and Gary Rhoden? You think they're both dead?
I think they're both dead. Looks like someone has beat the fuck out of them.
Is there anybody else in the house?
Not that I know of. The door was locked when we got here, and I went in, and they were laying on the floor.
Okay. I need you to get out of the house and wait.
I'm done now.
Okay?
I'm standing outside right now.
Okay, just stay out of the house. Don't let anybody go in there, okay?
Yeah.
All right, we got deputies on the way, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As she shakily ended her 911 call, she hurried over to one of Dana and Christopher's sons, Clarence Christopher Jr., who went by Frankie. Frankie lived in a trailer just a stone's throw away from his parents, with his fiancée Hannah Gilley and their 6-month-old son Ruger. Frankie's child from another relationship, Brentley, would also stay there a lot too. Bobby banged on the door and to her surprise, 3-year-old Brentley opened it. He seemed confused and said it looked like his dad had turned into a zombie. He had grabbed his hand to try and wake him up, but his hand had dropped to his side. Bobby ran inside to find the bodies of her nephew Frankie and his fiancée Hannah. They were both dead in their bed, blood soaking the sheets and floor. Next to them was their 6-month-old son Ruger. He was patting his dad's chest and was also covered in blood, but miraculously both Ruger and Brentley were physically unharmed. Bobby was beside herself, and one cannot begin to imagine what was going through her head at that point. She and Dana had a brother, James, and he headed over to Dana's trailer, who was also just a short walk away. They all lived on the same plot of land. He walked in and found their sister, 37-year-old Dana, dead as well. He then found hers and Christopher Sr.'s 2 children, 19-year-old Hannah Rhoden and 16-year-old Christopher Jr. They had all been in their beds and all of them had been shot to death. Hannah had been in her bed with her 4-day-old baby, Kylie. Kylie was also alive and physically unharmed. In a matter of minutes, 7 people had been found deceased, 4 children left without parents, and as police sped over, local news quickly descended on the trailers. Little did authorities know, another call would come in a few hours later, several miles away. Donald Stone, hearing the news, decided to go and check on his cousin, Kenneth Rhoden. Kenneth was Christopher Sr.'s brother.
911, can I help you?
Yeah, I need a deputy to come out to close to.
Okay.
It's all this stuff. It's on the news. I just found my cousin with a gunshot wound.
Kenneth lived on Left Fork Road, just a few miles away from where some of his family had just been found. But the 44-year-old was also dead, having been shot in the head. He was surrounded by cash.
Okay. Sir, is he alive?
No.
What's his name?
Kenneth Rhoden.
Okay, sir. Are you out of the house?
I'm out of the house right now.
Okay, sir. We're going to get deputies out there to you, okay? All right. Take care.
There are breaking developments in the massacre in Pike County we've been telling you about all day. Just moments ago, Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine said an 8th shooting victim had been found. That shooting scene is near the border with Adams County. Police are investigating at least 3 different locations on or near Union Hill Road, which is northeast of Peebles. Chopper 9 was over the area at noon today as the investigation was underway. At least 2 of the victims, we're told, are juveniles, and at least 7 of those victims are believed to be members of the same family. That is according to comments by Attorney General Mike DeWine. He made those to 700 WLW. It is not known if the gunman is among the dead.
8 bodies in total had now been discovered in 4 separate places. They had all been shot, some as many as 9 times. 40-year-old Christopher Rhoden Sr., his ex-wife, 37-year-old Dana Manley Rhoden, their 3 children, 19-year-old Hannah Rhoden, 16-year-old Christopher Jr., and 20-year-old Frankie Rhoden. 20-year-old Hannah Gilley, Frankie's fiancée, 38-year-old Gary Rhoden, Christopher Sr.'s cousin, and 44-year-old Kenneth Rhoden, Christopher Sr.'s brother. The 3 young children, 4-day-old Kylie, 6-month-old Ruger, and 3-year-old Brentley, were all taken out of the area and put into temporary protective custody. Hannah Rhoden also had another daughter, almost 3-year-old Sophia. She had been out of the house with her dad Jake that day and was also unharmed. The dogs were taken away as well.
Investigators worked through the night, gathering clues about the killings of 8 members of the Rhoden family. One of 4 properties turned crime scene in Pike County. Most of the victims shot as they lay in bed, one with her 4-day-old baby nearby. That infant is one of 3 young children to survive the massacre.
That's out of my realm of thinking that anyone could do that. How heartless.
A $25,000 reward's now being offered as the small town of Piketon remains on edge.
And I'm thinking, what else will happen in our community? What's going on?
Everyone knew the Rhoden family. They were a big part of their community. Christopher Sr. had lived in Ohio since birth. He had spent most of his life working in construction and was described as hard-working, dependable, a family man. His now ex-wife Dana and he had always maintained a very good relationship despite their split. She was a nursing assistant and loved gardening and baking, and was a big presence in her local church. 20-year-old Frankie had taken after his dad and studied welding. He was excited to marry Hannah, progress with his work, and just be the best dad he could be to his 2 young sons. His fiancée, Hannah Gilley, said she loved nothing more than being a mother. She wanted a house of kids and a big, bustling family. The youngest victim of the shooting, Christopher Jr., was known as a funny kid with a very sharp sense of humour. He was a talented performer too, singing baritone in his choir. His sister Hannah Rhoden was a nursing assistant like her mom, but her big passion was photography. She was loud and feisty with a big personality. Much like his brother Christopher Sr., Kenneth Rhoden was a hard worker too. He would drive an hour each way to his job in Columbus, Ohio, but didn't like being away from his family for too long. Gary Rhoden was said to be quiet, but the kindest and most helpful guy you could meet. If you called him at 2 a.m. and needed something, he was there. News was spreading further afield than the local stations, and it was soon international.
And now the search is on for a suspect who could still be at large.
I cannot confirm that there is no one still on the loose that may be involved in this. If they are, they will be armed and dangerous.
The investigation at each scene will continue as police try to find out what may have motivated someone to commit this kind of mass murder.
Before long, all eyes were on the small community of Piketon. Looking at the crime scenes, it seemed that everyone had been killed in the middle of the night. Christopher Sr. and Gary appeared to have been shot first at around midnight. It was clearly a methodical hit, almost like an execution. It had been well planned out and well thought through. 3-year-old Brentley could tell the police nothing. He had been asleep in the front room at the time and didn't see or hear anything. No one else had either. No cars appeared to have driven past at the time, and there were no neighbours apart from each other. Although there were 4 separate crime scenes, they were all very close. 3 of them being less than a few minutes' walk from each other. Police were able to move all the trailers and put them into a warehouse together, where they monitored them each hour. They also seized and searched dozens of vehicles on the land. They did think they gained a lead quite quickly with some discoveries at the properties.
Well, Julie, Attorney General Mike DeWine says 3 pot-growing operations were found at 3 crime scenes. It's more clues in this very mysterious case.
I don't think pot's a part of it.
It's one drug or another drug around here.
The Piketon community reacting after learning a pot-growing operation was found at 3 of the homes where 8 members of the Rhoden family were shot execution style.
Marijuana grow crops were found at 3 of the 4 scenes, with 2,000 cannabis plants in one location. And this initially led them to suspect the potential involvement of the Mexican cartel, especially given that Kenneth, who was growing plants outside, was found surrounded by a large sum of cash as well. It seemed that crime scene had been staged as some sort of sign. Detectives believed there was definitely more than one shooter as well. 3 different types of shell casings had been found, along with different sized shoe prints and treads. However, the theory of the cartel was soon questioned. The killers had to know the properties. They had to know the layouts and the routines of the family members very well too, and it also seemed odd that the dogs did not react. People they didn't know in the middle of the night would have undoubtedly caused a commotion. Perhaps the killers had silencers on their guns as well. There were so many questions, but one thing could now be ruled out: the cartel theory. To leave the children and the dogs unharmed was unusual. One detective said with hits like this, there are rarely any survivors or witnesses. The killers simply had to be known to the Rhoden family. Despite the public's very natural worries about their own safety, the police knew this was personal. They did not suspect anyone else in the community was in danger.
Sheriff Charles Reeder believes the Rhodens were specifically targeted, and he's warning other family members to be on guard.
I cautioned them that they were a target, and I told them to be armed.
Both Reeder and DeWine believe the community isn't at risk, but is asking for community members to be vigilant.
It is in the interest of the people of the state of Ohio that we find this murderer or these murderers as quick as we can.
Between April 26th and May 3rd, all 8 victims were buried, and hundreds were there. As the community were rebuilding, the authorities were hard at work, and to say that it was a tough case was an understatement.
The hills of rural Pike County still buzz with speculation and fear.
It's been 7 months since 8 people were killed in Ohio's largest ever mass murder. There have been theories about what happened to the Rhoden family, but there are no clear answers. No one's been arrested. Sheriff Charles Reeder has a gut feeling that the killers are local, and he thinks that people know something they're afraid to tell.
They're scared of incriminating themselves. They won't come talk to us. Or they're scared of being victim number 9. And if you're scared of being victim number 9, you know enough that you need to come see us. We're trying to find killers, and I'm asking anyone to come in, tell us the truth. If I find you're not telling the truth, I've ordered your arrest.
Over 800 tips came in, and they conducted more than 400 interviews. But as the months passed, the department needed more resources. This was unprecedented for their area, and far too big for a small team.
Despite all of this activity over the weekend, there are still people in this community who don't believe this case will ever be solved.
April 2017 came around, and it was now a year after the murders. A year with no movement and no answers. Petitions were circling with people hoping to get the FBI involved. Although the public were concerned things weren't moving quickly enough, investigators were trying to find the balance between sharing information and being very careful about what they said. They knew the killers, whoever they were, would be watching everything, and they had to stay one step ahead of them. At this point, detectives had executed dozens of search warrants, and one day went to search the grounds of a 27-acre farm in Peebles, Ohio. A few tips told them this was an important area to look at. The farm had sold a couple of months earlier, but it was once owned by Edward Wagner, who went by Jake. Jake was the father of Sophia and the ex-boyfriend of Hannah Rhoden.
Details are emerging in the weekend property searches connected to the Rhoden family murders in Pike County. The owner of one of the properties tells the 9 on Your Side I-Team that investigators showed up at his house because of the ex-boyfriend of one of the victims.
You see on some Chopper 9 footage from last Friday that detectives searching through several trailers on property where a business called Unlimited Motors is located. I spoke with the property owner today who said the trailers and all that stuff belongs to a guy named Jake Wagner and his family. He says the Wagners dropped off the trailers about 10 days ago and he was supposed to store it for them temporarily. Over the weekend, we confirmed through property records that the other 2 properties investigators searched on Friday and Saturday are also connected to the Wagner family. The Rhoden murders have gone unsolved for 14 months.
The connection between the Wagners and the Rhodens was definitely there, and police had been closely watching all of them since they found out that Jake and Hannah had been in disputes about the custody of Sophia. Police couldn't help but wonder either. Sophia was not in any of the homes on the day of the shootings. Was this a total coincidence, or did it point to a sinister plan? But investigators had never named anyone in the Wagner family as a person of interest, let alone a suspect. However, in small towns like this, where everyone knows everyone else's business, it wouldn't be long before some people started speculating. The Wagner family were wealthy and powerful, and everyone in Piketon knew them. It was a name that had a lot of weight behind it. Jake's grandmother, Frederica, owned more than 1,700 acres in Pike County, and records placed the value of everything at more than $4 million. A substantial amount of money for anyone, but in that particular area, it was unheard of. The Wagners were described as a very tight group, one that stuck together and rarely let people into their circle. After the murders, Jake's family, his father Billy, mother Angela, and older brother George, moved 4,000 miles away to Alaska, taking Sophia with them as well. They said they had to flee after getting death threats and listening to the constant lies being spread about them. It was now 2018, and as much as it seemed like the year had been quiet, little did everyone know things had been moving behind the scenes. In the last few months, the police had gathered a lot of evidence, and as 2018 started to draw to a close, detectives announced they had finally made 6 arrests in connection with the Rhoden family murders.
Yesterday, a Pike County grand jury indicted 4 individuals for aggravated murder with death penalty specifications.
48-year-old Angela Wagner, her husband, 47-year-old George Wagner III, who went by Billy, their 2 sons, 27-year-old George IV, and 26-year-old Jake, were all arrested and charged with murder, along with 20 other charges. 65-year-old Rita Newcomb, Angela's mother, and 76-year-old Frederica, Billy's mom, were also both arrested, accused of covering up the murders. Since the police found out about the custody issues with Sophia, they had uncovered enough evidence that showed the plan to kill the Rhodens had been in motion for a while.
Members of one family conspired, planned, carried out, and then allegedly covered up their violent act to wipe out members of another family. They did this quickly, coldly, calmly, and very carefully, but not carefully enough.
Jake met Hannah when she was just 13. He started grooming her, and by all accounts, she was infatuated with the older Jake, who at the time was almost 20. She even moved in with the Wagner family too. They got matching tattoos on their ring fingers and told everyone they were as good as married. By 15, she was pregnant with Sophia, but shortly into her pregnancy, Jake became obsessed with the idea of custody. And even though they were still together at this point, he wanted Sophia all to himself when she was born. He started controlling what Hannah ate, telling her where she could and couldn't go, who she could and couldn't see. His obsessive behaviour was soon too much, and they broke up, with Hannah moving back in with her mother Dana. But because of Sophia, there was now constant tension and issues between the pair, and by extension their families. Jake even started taping their conversations, hoping to catch Hannah saying something that would mean he could take Sophia away. But it never worked. This recording is part of one.
Anyway, so you pick up today, and I pick up tomorrow, and so on and so on. Yeah, my dog.
I don't care. Have a nice day.
This is part of another taped conversation involving his brother George and Sophia.
Why are you so filthy? Do they not know how to give you a bath? Put clothes on you?
One text from Jake to Hannah said, "I done told you she is living with me now. You can live with us or not, that's your choice." Hannah replied that if he tried to take Sophia from her, it would be his worst mistake. Jake said, "Hannah, I'm telling you right now, make a choice and make it now. If you do this, it's over and I'll take Sophie. And if I have to, by force. I love you with all my heart. If you love me and Sophie, you will make the right choice. I want you to live with me and Sophie. That don't mean we have to stay at my house all the time, but she will live wherever I am." When Jake found out that Hannah was pregnant with her second child, Kylie, despite it not being his baby, he demanded that Hannah put his surname on Kylie's birth certificate. Kylie's father was known to the Rhodens already. He was Hannah Gilley's brother, Charlie Gilley. Hannah Gilley had been engaged to Frankie. Jake was furious when she said no, and then tried to get mandatory visitation, claiming that because Kylie was Sophia's sister, he was as good as Kylie's dad too. Even after DNA had proven she was not his baby, he still told everyone Hannah had to be lying, and started accusing her boyfriend of sexually assaulting Sophia. It was such an unsettling reaction to have about a child that was nothing to do with him, but Hannah had no problem fighting him. She was back living with her mother Dana and just wanted a fresh start. Jake persisted with the custody argument, and just a couple of weeks before the murders, he presented Hannah with some papers. Custody documents, in fact, signed by various people. These turned out to have been forged by his mother Angela. Hannah saw right through it, signed nothing, and said no way on earth was this ever going to happen. Jake needed to just leave them alone. Detectives had seized and searched laptops and social media accounts, and they found that Hannah had even put a post on Facebook via her mother's account, letting everyone know what was going on, and vowing to never let him have Sophia full time. "I won't sign papers ever, it won't happen. They will have to kill me first," she said in a chilling post. It really is unknown why it had got to this point in their heads, but Billy, Angela, George and Jake developed an elaborate plan to kill the family. They not only studied their habits, routines, work patterns, and even when the dogs were walked, but they also studied some of the cameras on the properties as well, which had, before the murders, been tampered with. More searches of different homes and vehicles found shell casings which matched those found at the murder scenes, and shoes that matched the same size and tread from the scenes too. They managed to trace the shoes back to Angela buying them at a Walmart just a day before the killings. During another search, police found parts to make silencers for guns, as well as 20 bags of concrete mix. The Wagners had used this to bury some of the weapons and then hide them in a goose house on the lake. What was believed to be a $630 cell phone jammer to prevent the family from calling for help was discovered too. Their bank accounts were also analysed, which showed their money was coming from far more than farming. Police said they had operated the same as high-level criminal organisations, and a lot of money that had come from burning down their own properties and cars, and claiming insurance for them. A disturbingly dark picture was being painted about a terrifying family. The Wagners were, by all accounts, a family you did not cross, and a scary match to meet if you did. Their loyalty to each other was strong. They would decide and plan everything together, even if it was something really small or insignificant. Everything was done by committee. Angela was the matriarch, and she would do anything for her boys, Jake and George, and everything to protect them. While in Alaska, Jake had met and married a woman named Beth Ann. She said she feared for her life when she fled her brief and tumultuous marriage to him. When they had met, she made it clear she wanted to wait until they were intimate in any way. He, along with his family, rushed the marriage and, in her words, made sure they had sex the night of the wedding. Beth Ann described an unhealthily close relationship between Angela and her sons, especially Jake, recalling that the first time she met Jake, she thought he and Angela were a couple. Beth Ann and George's now ex-wife Tabitha said that the Wagners had a pack-like mentality, but Angela definitely ran the show. They were all very isolated and insular, and were keen to keep it that way. If someone new came into the fold, they isolated them too, separating them from their family and friends. Tabitha said she saw the exact same pattern of behaviour when the then 13-year-old Hannah started spending time with Jake, and she was immediately concerned for Hannah and Sophia's well-being. Tabitha had met and married George out of high school. She too was isolated from her family and prevented from leaving the Wagner home. Angela even dictated what George and Tabitha could and couldn't do sexually, believing certain things would send you to hell. Angela was involved quite literally in every part of her sons' lives. After Tabitha and George had their son Bulveen, she tried to convince George to move out, but he refused and she knew she had to end things. She left in November 2014 after George started beating her with a belt, and Angela attacked her with a piece of wood, threatening to shoot her. As soon as she could, Tabitha got on her bike and went to a gas station where she called her mother for help. Angela started to throw out baseless accusations against both Beth Ann and Tabitha. She even accused Beth Ann of inappropriately touching Sophia and trying to poison the children. George kept Bulveen and banned Tabitha from having contact with their son for a year. They finally agreed on 50-50 custody, but George would rarely comply and didn't even tell her when his family was moving to Alaska, taking Bulveen with them along with Sophia. Jake believed everything his mother said, and believing this too, he told Beth Ann he would string her up in the barn, beat her with a bat, and then burn the barn down. He told her if he didn't do it, his mum and dad would have no problem finishing his task. Beth Ann said that the day she left, she changed her clothes inside a Walmart, slipped out through a section in the back, with absolutely nothing to her name, and met a friend who drove her out of the state. Along with all of this and the motive of the obsession of custody, with not just Sophia but Bulveen as well, they now had the murder weapons, the shoes, and the receipts. Pulling everything together, the timeline of events was as follows. Sophia was never supposed to be with Jake and his family that day. It had been a totally random offering from Jake. Hannah, with a now 4-day-old baby, was exhausted and thought she would let Sophia's dad have her. The Wagners had silencers already made, the new shoes already purchased, and the routines of everyone down. Sometime after 10 p.m, Billy, George and Jake left their home. Angela stayed at home with her grandchildren. The three of them went to Christopher Sr.'s trailer first, where they shot him and his cousin Gary. They then quickly moved on to the second trailer, next door, where Frankie and Hannah Gilly were murdered, before fleeing and heading just down the path to Dana's trailer, where Dana, Jake's ex Hannah, and Christopher Rhoden Jr. were all shot in bed. Finally, they went to Kenneth's home, about 10 minutes away. They all went home, put the weapons into the concrete mixture, and moved that out into a goose hut in the middle of one of their lakes. It was hard to say for sure, but some believe that Angela was behind the plan and had been involved in every part of her son's relationships and dictated everything. That being said, Angela, Billy, George and Jake were all indicted by a grand jury on counts of aggravated murder and forging child custody documents, amongst other charges. The charges totaled 23 each.
Well, the first of 4 family members charged with killing 8 members of another Ohio family has pleaded not guilty to aggravated murder.
A second member of Pike County's Wagner family has pled not guilty.
Not guilty was the plea Tuesday from Billy Wagner here in Pike County Common Pleas Court.
Angela Wagner says she's innocent.
They were all held without bond and all 4 pleaded not guilty. The prosecution said they would be seeking the death penalty against all of them. The town was very split. Some were not surprised, but others could not believe their names would be connected, saying it had to be a misunderstanding. Jake, Billy and George had even attended the funerals, stood there and grieved with everyone else. The state later dropped the murder charges against Billy's mother, Frederica, and the judge ordered the charges be dismissed without prejudice and a gag order be placed on the attorneys. Rita Newcomb, however, who was Angela's mother, pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of obstructing official business, and in exchange, the felony charges of forgery, perjury, and obstructing justice were dismissed. She said she felt bad as a Christian for lying about things, which was why she had changed her plea.
Begin right away with some breaking news tonight.
On the 5-year anniversary of the killings, Jake Wagner also changed his mind and finally pleaded guilty to 23 charges.
I am guilty, Your Honor. Life without parole. That's what a Pike County man will receive after changing his plea to guilty.
These included aggravated murder, conspiracy, aggravated burglary, tampering with evidence, unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, which was Hannah when she was 13. During his court appearances, Jake often smirked and laughed. He said he was sorry, but he added he felt like he had no choice but to kill Hannah, saying she was neglectful and making more wild allegations about Hannah's boyfriend at the time, molesting Sophia. Just the same as with his ex-wife Beth Ann, it was just another crazy, baseless accusation. He even admitted responsibility for 5 of the 8 shootings. He said he had killed Dana, Hannah Rhoden, Chris Jr., Frankie, and Hannah Gilley. He said his dad Billy was the one to shoot Christopher Sr., Kenneth, and Gary. George had fired 1 bullet which missed, but then he had frozen and hadn't killed any of them. Jake agreed to testify against his father, mother and brother if the death penalty was taken off the table for all of them. The prosecution agreed to the terms.
And that breaking news tonight, another suspect is agreeing to plead guilty.
Well, in some ways, this comes as no surprise. Call it her road to survival in a case that still sends chills up your spine.
Knowing this, his mother Angela followed suit, pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated murder. She was handed a minimum of 30 years without any chance of early release. Jake was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Today we really got an idea of why this trial could last up to 2 months.
In 2022, George Wagner's trial started. Given the fact he had fired no bullets, something confirmed by Jake, he was still pleading not guilty.
Blood spatter, ballistic evidence.
That's a bullet hole.
And shoe prints.
In this area of the shoe, I'm not seeing any kind of wear pattern at all.
The focus of today's testimony in George Wagner IV's murder trial. On the stand the entire day, Shane Henshaw, a crime scene investigator with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Henshaw took jurors back to April 22, 2016. Rhoden relatives in the courtroom became emotional when testimony shifted to the victims and the amount of blood found inside the home.
You see a large accumulation of blood in this area. In this case, at some point, the individual was turned and dragged toward the kitchen.
George was in fact now denying he was even there at any of the crime scenes, claiming he was asleep by 10 p.m. But the trial would undoubtedly have a lot more grey areas to it than that. It was not as black and white as George wanted people to think. He was there when it was being planned. He was there when it was happening, and he did not do anything to stop it. He also then spent years denying and lying about it. The jury heard from numerous people, including Angela, Jake, who testified without cameras, and Tabitha and Beth Ann.
I told them that I was not going to go back inside, that I was going to leave. And so Angela threw a board at me and then told George that she's going to go inside and get a gun.
At any point outside, did George have physical contact with you?
Before the argument got really worse, we were outside and we were arguing, and he told me I needed to stop screaming or he was going to smack me, and so I screamed louder, and so he smacked me.
I packed my bag. I called my friend in Alaska because he had said he would help me if I needed help. And I was making plans to leave the house immediately. I was afraid they were going to kill me.
A lot of witnesses had their testimonies redacted when it came to the recording in the courtroom because they said the Wagners were such a scary family, they didn't want to have their words out there publicly. George testified in his own defense.
What did you think of the Rhodens? They were normal people to me. Same as everybody else I hung out with in life.
Did you like them, dislike them?
Yes, I liked them.
You've heard testimony from Jake, correct?
Yes.
You heard your mom testify, right?
Yes.
Were you aware at any time that Jake and your dad and your mom were planning to kill the Rhodens?
No.
Was that ever discussed with you?
No.
Did you have any idea that was going to happen?
No.
Well, you've described in some detail the thefts, the arsons that your family participated in.
Yes.
So why didn't you think they could do something like this?
Theft is one thing. Murder is an entirely different thing.
You said that the night of the homicides, you went to bed at 10 o'clock. You indicated that you watched a movie.
I remember watching a movie with the kids at this point. I don't remember what it was.
Okay.
It's been a long time. I mean, it may have been. From my memory now, I remember going to bed around 10-ish. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I remember.
We know, at least according to Jake, that Chris Sr. and Gary were killed at 11 o'clock, right?
I think that's what he said.
Which makes your story at the border impossible, right?
Again, I don't remember exactly everything I said at the border.
The jury took only 8 hours to return their verdicts. They found him guilty on all counts. This included 8 counts of aggravated murder. This had been one of the longest and most expensive criminal trials in Ohio's history. George was sentenced to 8 consecutive terms plus 121 years with no chance of parole.
The court hereby sentences you to serve a mandatory term of life imprisonment without parole. On count 2 of the indictment.
Some people did express empathy towards George, acknowledging that he didn't kill anyone and that Jake and Angela had completely thrown him under the bus in order to get a lesser sentence for themselves. And especially when you look at the unbelievable loyalty within the family, it was a surprising turn of events. People said that George could be very easily led by his family and could have found himself wrapped up in something before he realised how bad it actually was. But others didn't feel quite so bad, believing he deserves his sentence. He still conspired, he still covered up, and he still watched as 8 people died. George later said he was seeking a new trial, but as of 2024, there has been no movement on this. Billy Wagner is still pleading not guilty, and his trial was supposed to start on May 6, 2024. However, a new date was set for January 2025 at the earliest. The defence now had an extra 16,000 pages of evidence to get through.
And now, Wilma McCoy worries even more for her mother, Geneva Rhoden, the matriarch of the Rhoden family.
Yeah, I got to go tell my mom that it's not till January of 2025. Almost 9 years. Almost 9 years. We will be in a decade before they're all found guilty and sentenced.
McCoy, mostly concerned for her mother, who has to wait longer for justice.
And now she has to wait another year. Will she make it?
During George's trial, Brentley, Frankie's son, who was now 11 and living with his mother Chelsea, said, "I've been scared since that night, knowing bad guys came into my house while I was sleeping. I'm always scared now that I will lose my mommy." George's son Balveen lives with his mother Tabitha, and it is unknown where Ruger and Sophia are living, but sources say they are well and taken care of. And with that, we bring today's episode to somewhat of a conclusion, with 3 out of the 4 serving sentences. There are really no words to sum up a case like this. It is darker and more twisted than any TV drama could conjure up. It is one of the coldest, most calculated and ruthless cases we have looked at on this channel.
While it has been 8 years since 8 members of the Rhoden family were shot and killed in Pike County,
And even all these years on, it is clear that the impact of this case is still widely felt. So many lives lost and so many more affected. And for what? Hannah Gilly's mum Andrea said, "My grandson was made an orphan in one night. I see the pain in Ruger's eyes. He mourns for his dad so bad, and that's something he'll have to do for the rest of his life." These children not only lost their parents, but their uncles, aunts, grandparents and extended family too. How do you ever recover from a tragedy so deep? Andrea said she is forever going to be answering questions that we can all agree should never have had to be asked in the first place.